As part of the run-up to the Folio's arrival, the Bach aria soloists played some historically appropriate classical music in the library.
Bo Bledsoe is the guitarist for that group, but he also leads another one that explores some different musical turf.
It's called Ensemble Iberica. Producer Ashley Holcroft has more on the cross-cultural contributions they've been making.
It's well into the evening on Cinco de Mayo in the West Bottoms. But inside, the ship is swaying to the sultry sounds of the ensemble. Tonight featuring Fedra Cooper Barrera. Ensemble Iberica was founded in 2013. At its core, Bo Bledsoe, Michael McClintock, and Jordan Shipley.
The mission is to perform music from Iberia, which is Portugal and Spain, and all of their former colonies. And it's not really time specific. It could be medieval music or Baroque music. It could be Islamic music from southern Spain. And it could also be modern tango music. Or romantic boleros. It's not really time specific or location specific, but it all relates back to that peninsula of Iberia.
A native of Arkansas, Bo moved to Kansas City for graduate school at the UMKC Conservatory in 1993. But it was something else entirely that made him want to stay.
I had a buddy here at the Art Institute, and he would take me to those late night juke joints that would stay open all night. And so I decided this was a city for me.
And it was at the conservatory that he began his love affair with the music of colonial Spain and Portugal.
I was playing a lot for like the flamenco dance classes, and there was a guy in there from Guanajuato, Mexico, and he would take me to his family home in Mexico, and that's kind of where my deep interest in Mexican music started. And just over many years, I started going to Argentina and Spain more often, and of course Portugal, and studying those different musics within their own social contexts. And that's really been my artistic process ever since.
Nowadays, his travels are uniquely beneficial to audiences here.
We have the sister cities of Kansas City, Sevilla, Spain. So we're always going there, and we'll stay there for a little while, we'll perform there, and then we'll bring back artists from there, and the same with Lisbon. So I like to set up these, it's like a groove in a record or something, you know, like a stylus and a piece of clay. The more it goes back and forth, the deeper the relationship gets between the two cities. I'm a conservatory-educated musician, but I think I've gotten more out of just going to little small towns and studying with real masters in certain genres, playing in different festivals and in people's homes, and you know, you're eating the food and playing with the kids, and you know, all of that has to do with how the music sounds. You know, like for instance, how a mother will call their child to come in for dinner at night, you know, has a certain musical sound to it. You know, Argentine tango sounds and looks like Buenos Aires. Portuguese fado is very much a Lisbon thing that feels like that town. And they're very much married together. So if you go there and stay there for a long time, it'll inform the music much more than, say, reading a book or taking classes at a conservatory.
Whether it's in Guanajuato, Mexico, or here locally, the ensemble has benefited greatly from cultivating partnerships, as seen in their 2016 lineup. This time, it was with the Owen Cox Dance Group and tenor Nathan Grainer for a concert in celebration of Spanish dance to be performed at Johnson County Community College just days from this rehearsal.
Oh, that feels right.
From recital halls to the middle of the MAP Music Festival, the goal for what Ensemble Iberica wants to bring to their audience is clear.
I want them to feel like they've experienced something that they would not normally experience in Kansas City, like they've kind of gone on a little trip. You know, I want them to make a personal relationship with a different kind of music. And then, of course, I want them to come back, which we've been really lucky with. We have a very good repeat audience, and it grows every season.